All right, welcome back to the Gridiron Expert. And what a night we have for you tonight. What a live stream we have for you tonight. A very special night, Tuesday, November 12th. And we've got a live showing of the college football playoff rankings as we head into week 12. Only 3 weeks left in the regular season. And we're going to be here to break down these new set of rankings with you live. Live reaction. And of course, we can't show it on the screen because copyright and all that junk. But we're going to be watching them live with you, watching it TV at home. We're going to be watching it here on the iPad, immediately digesting what the committee puts out tonight. And it's going to be interesting. It's going to be very, very interesting to see because we saw 2 top 10 teams lose just last week. We saw Georgia, of course, get destroyed against Ole Miss, and we saw Miami get upset on the road against Georgia Tech. So it's not just so much going to be a matter of where do those 2 teams fall? Are they still within striking distance of a playoff appearance? Granted, Miami only took their first loss. Georgia still 2 losses, could still find themselves getting in. But who becomes number 3? Who becomes number 4? What does the playoff picture look like as we head into this weekend? One that really doesn't have that many massive matchups. Tennessee and Georgia are going to be the biggest game this weekend. And obviously, if Georgia loses that game, 3 losses could be completely out of the playoff picture. But we're excited. We're excited to see kind of what happens, what the committee does. Are they as consistent as they were last week? I actually didn't have as many issues with their rankings last week. Typically, I do. I was not that upset with them. Let's see if they can make it 2 in a row. That'd be like the first time ever that they do 2 good things in a row when picking these teams. But one of the things I want to do tonight, we have, if you're watching the Champions Classic on ESPN, Michigan State and Kansas, hopefully this game doesn't have any crazy endings. We don't go to overtime or anything massive like that. Kansas currently up by 9 with about 3.5 minutes left. So we're going to kind of digest what happened back in week 11. We didn't get to do a week 11 recap. Life sometimes gets in the way, as it has a lot this season. So I thought we could do that now. We still have a little bit of time before the rankings are going to come out. We'll digest what happened last week, which of course is going to impact what we see tonight. Then we'll break down the rankings live with you, hash those out, and then we'll call it a night. It's going to be a good next hour and a half, however long it takes us. And of course, the whole way through, we're going to be taking your questions, your comments, listening to your reactions and thoughts in the chat as we progress through the night. So let's get into it. Before we do that, though, again, welcome back to everybody that's here. We have everything going across the ticker there. We'd love for you to become a member of our GE Nation. If you aren't already, sign up for all of our notifications here on the channel. Sign up for our newsletters over on thegridironexpert.com. Sign up for our expert picks over on thegridironexpert.com. We do college football and NFL spread picks over there. And we are 18. We're in the teens, guys. 18 away from reaching our goal. And if we reach our goal, as we've said, we will do a 24-hour live stream right here on the channel. And we're 18 away. We're really, really, really close. Still lots of time. That deadline's been extended all the way until the Super Bowl, all the way until February. And I think we can definitely hit that with our new holiday special as well. The holiday special, of course, we've been doing this for the last few years. We'll give you every single college football bowl game pick, every single pick for the final 4 weeks of the NFL regular season, and then every NFL playoff pick as well. That's almost 80 picks against the spread that we're going to give out for, what is it, $42.99 over on thegridironexpert.com. So we'd love for you to sign up. Those sales will go directly towards our goal. So I think we can get a few of those and we can have that 24-hour live stream coming your way very, very soon. So all that down in the description below. And we welcome all of you that are watching now. We'll be watching later, whether you're old or whether you are new. You're here because you love college football. We're here because we love college football. And we're one giant community. We're really looking forward to continuing to grow our community. So let's dive into this first. Let's take a look at what we saw last week, a mini week 11 recap here in the final minutes of this Champions Classic. Let's start with Georgia and Miami, right? Maybe the 2 biggest storylines that we saw from last week. The number 3 team in the country, the number 4 team in the country, both go down. Here's what my biggest takeaways from those 2 games are. Number 1, I'm looking at Georgia, and I think Georgia's got a major culture problem right now. Look, this team has never looked the part this year as they have in previous years, right? They looked horrendous again in that first half against Alabama, mounted the massive comeback, almost pulled it off, fell just short. They looked really, really bad there. When's the last time you could say a Kirby Smart team, looked that bad in any half, in any game or any half? That kind of felt the beginning of the end. They looked phenomenal against Texas to an extent. The offense was still atrocious against Texas. It was the defense that really won Georgia that game, forcing turnover after turnover. A lot of points that Georgia scored coming from drives that began in favorable territory, in Texas territory, putting them in a good spot. So obviously something to kind of keep in mind as you watch Georgia. The defense really hasn't been the issue so much as it has been the offense. And then last week against Ole Miss, they got off to a very hot start, 7-0 right off the bat, and then everything collapsed after that. Got outscored 28-3 the rest of the way. Ole Miss winning 28-10. Defense didn't have much of an answer in that game to that offense. The offense couldn't get anything going against a very strong Ole Miss defensive line. And then, of course, you saw all the stuff after the fact. You got Carson Beck over on the bench just laughing it up when they're down 18 points. You've got the one player, celebrating with his friends. And look, I actually don't have the biggest issue in the world with that. He probably should have said, "Hey, how are you?" and left. He's arguing he hadn't seen those guys in a long time. Those were his good friends. It surprised him. Obviously, Ole Miss was rushing the field, so he was genuinely excited to see them, and that's why he was celebrating with the enemy. I don't think he wasn't happy they lost. He wasn't celebrating a loss. But regardless, not a good look by any means. I will say the only thing I would argue is Kirby Smart, how he handled the situation. Called him an idiot. What an idiot. What an idiot. I can't believe he would do something like that. What about the guys that have repeatedly gotten, arrested and, sanctioned for driving 100, 120 miles an hour, multiple speeding tickets? No one knows how to drive apparently in Athens, Georgia. So what about them? Are they idiots, or are we just going to condone that? So there's a culture problem. I think there's something going on in that locker room right now for Georgia. It's not right. Now, here's the thing. The Bulldogs can still get to the Cashapp playoff. If they lose to Tennessee this weekend, they're done. Don't envision that happening personally. I just don't. Not in Athens, not at night. But they lose that, they're out. They win out if they beat Tennessee and they beat Georgia Tech, who just beat Miami. We'll talk about that in a second. Then they very well could still get in as a 2-loss team, and more than likely that will happen. I fully expect them to still be in the playoff picture tonight. In the top 12, I expect Georgia to be ranked in there tonight here in just a few minutes. So, but regardless, this is not the same Georgia team we have seen in years past. They're still a very talented football team. They're still a very good football team. But are they a team that we at one point thought could still go on to win a national championship? Maybe not. A lot of weaknesses there for Georgia, unlike we've seen in previous years. Miami, on the other hand, number 4 team in the country. I've never seen a top 10 team struggle that hard and that poorly against the jet sweep. They made no adjustments whatsoever to stop the Georgia Tech run game. They had no answer on the edges. It was so bad and so frustrating if you were a Miami fan to watch what happened down in Atlanta. It was a horribly coached game, a horribly, a terrible effort game from the Hurricanes. And again, they never made any adjustments. They were getting torched in the first half, made no adjustments in the second half, and ultimately lost by 5. Cam Ward can only do so much. And at one point in time, he tried to do a little too much, led to him getting the strip sack, Georgia Tech sealing the win. So Miami's still a good team. I'm curious to see how much the committee punishes Miami, because they really don't have a great win on their resume. They really don't. They were undefeated. They were blowing teams out of the water, and that counts for a lot. The eye test is a big part of these rankings. There's no doubt about that. But they hadn't really had any great wins. Their best win is what? On the road against Florida, probably. Back all the way back in week 1. Florida State doesn't count as anything. I mean, who would you think is their best win? Like, Florida State doesn't count for anything. There's no one there. USF, Virginia Tech, California, both of those games ending in controversial fashion. I mean, Miami had found ways to win, finally found a way to lose on Saturday. Curious to see where the Hurricanes fall. They're still only a 1-loss team, although they would not be in the ACC championship right now. How crazy is that? SMU is still undefeated in conference play, playing really good football. Clemson's still in the hunt as well. So there's a chance, even with this 12-team format, that Miami could maybe miss out on the ACC championship as a 1-loss team and still slip in. Not even have to play in the ACC title and slip in, but obviously wouldn't get a first-round bye. So Hurricanes have a pretty favorable schedule down the stretch. Probably aren't going to lose to Wake Forest and Syracuse, I think is all they got left. So it probably will be okay. But how far do they fall? How much does the committee punish them for their first loss of the year? And granted, it wasn't even in dominating fashion. They were horrendous against the run, still only lost by 5. So it could have been significantly worse. It wasn't. They kept it close, but a loss is a loss. So that's what I'm interested to watch out for here. I will tell you right now, before we continue through the recap, this is my projected top 4 tonight. Not the 4 teams that get the bye, but the 4 teams that will be ranked 1, 2, 3, 4. Oregon and Ohio State should still remain 1 and 2. There's no, I don't think, any debate about that. Last week, the big debate was whether or not Georgia should be ranked second over Ohio State. Clearly, we got that answer. Ohio State deserved to be number 2. Oregon won. They took care of business. Ohio State 2. They took care of business. Number 3, number 4, both lost. In theory, the teams behind them are just going to move into those spots. And that would have been Texas, who destroyed Florida, and Penn State, who bounced back in a big way from their loss against Ohio State and beat Washington 35-6 in the whiteout game. So that is what I think the top 4 should look like tonight. Now, granted, if you look at that, 3 of those 4 are Big Ten teams. So when they show you the projected playoff picture, Oregon's going to be the 1 seed. They'll have a first-round bye. Ohio State would be the 5 seed because they are the highest-ranked team that's not a champion at this point. Texas, even though they're number 3, would be the 2 seed because they're the highest-ranked SEC team. They're the highest-ranked team that's next. That would be the, how that works. Obviously, we don't know who's going to win the SEC championship. As of right now, Texas, I don't even think would be in it. I think right now the SEC championship would be Tennessee and A&M. How crazy is that? But that's what I think the top 4 should look like tonight. Oregon, Ohio State, Texas, and Penn State. That's what it should look like. Continuing on for a second in the recap, and we're getting closer to the end of this game here. Only 36 seconds. Kansas up by 7, so it's looking good that we're not going to have extra time here or anything like that. But continuing on here, talk about BYU for a second. The jury is still out maybe on BYU. BYU is a good football team. They're a good football team. I'm not denying that. They've got some quality wins. A road win at SMU. They dominated Kansas State. They are undefeated. That deserves a lot of credit. They deserve a lot of praise for that. But boy, were they lucky against Utah. Were they lucky against Utah? Got down pretty decently early, battled back, but the game appeared to be over. But they blew that. They called the timeout. There's 2 things. It was back-to-back plays for BYU that really went in their favor. First one was a timeout where they claimed that the timeout had been called, but it was just so loud at Rice-Eccles Stadium that they couldn't hear the whistle. So, maybe not, I don't know. But then after that, they got sacked. The game was over. But somehow, some way, there was a defensive holding call that kept the drive alive. And BYU was able to get into field goal range, drill the game-winning field goal, and keep their undefeated season alive and avoid, I'm not going to say a bad loss because Utah's a very difficult place to play, but obviously a Utah team that's not that great, especially with the loss of Cam Rising. So you look at BYU, and if you actually go and dissect their schedule, you realize they've got a lot of close wins. They barely beat Oklahoma. They should have lost to Oklahoma State. Probably should have lost to Utah. They only beat SMU by 3. They're finding ways to win, and those wins should be rewarded. But is BYU a team? And they're going to be ranked in the top 10. I've got BYU ranked in my top 10 in the GE top 25, so I'm not even denying that. I'm not saying they should be ranked lower or anything like that, but I'm saying how real are they? If we put BYU in the college football playoff and say, hey, your first-round matchup is going to be against Alabama, 8 and 9, let's say, 8 seed and 9 seed, hypothetically. Do we really? I mean, we can all agree. I think that Alabama would be at least a 10-point favorite, if not more, in that game. So that's what I'm always interested to see here, how the committee handles that going forward. If BYU ends up going undefeated and winning the Big 12, I mean, God, they deserve all the praise. That means they would have beat Colorado possibly, or would have beat Kansas State again, or whoever it may be. But they were very, very fortunate against Utah, and a lot was exposed in that game against Utah. How they handle that going forward will be very interesting to me. And then the last thing I want to talk about here before we get closer to the official release tonight is LSU. What the heck was that? One of the biggest games of the year for LSU, and they just laid a massive egg at home. You want to praise yourself for having, this amazing home environment, night game in Death Valley, where, by the way, Brian Kelly was undefeated as head coach of the Tigers at night. Night games in Death Valley, he was undefeated. All of that stuff, and you get beat, 42-13? And what I thought was amazing in that game, as I said, we predicted Alabama LSU, and I said, look, if LSU wants to have a chance to win this game, they've got to find a way to stop Jalen Milroe. Because if you remember last year in Tuscaloosa, and I know Jaden Daniels got hurt in that game, but that didn't help the defense. They allowed 42 points, and Jalen Milroe ran all over them. So if they wanted to find a way to win, they had to stop Jalen Milroe, specifically on the ground, specifically with his rushing ability. Got the game over here. I'm trying to keep an eye on it. So that was kind of what we had to watch out for. And what did Jalen Milroe do? He had a better performance this year against LSU than he did last year. This year against LSU, 185 rushing yards on 12 carries for 4 touchdowns. The year before, 155 rushing yards and 4 touchdowns. So a ridiculous stat line for Jalen Milroe, who was just playing, outstanding ball right now, and LSU had no answer for him, which was downright embarrassing. How do you have 2 weeks to prepare and allow that to happen on your home turf? So LSU is out. That's the thing here, guys, is LSU is out of the playoff discussion. 3 losses, 2 of them in blowout fashion to Alabama and A&M, another loss to a pretty bad USC team this year, back in week 1. The question is, where does the committee rank them? Because what we've seen before in years past is even the teams that aren't in contention anymore, having those teams remaining ranked help the teams ranked ahead of them. So, for example, for Texas A&M, for Alabama, still saying that we still have wins over a currently ranked top 25, top 20 team helps their resume more than saying, well, we beat the number 10 team in the country back in week 1, and now that team's 2-7. That means nothing now, right? So I guess what I'm saying is, despite the fact that we're so focused on the top 12, the top 25, those teams ranked 13th through 25, still matter because they impact positively or negatively impact the teams that are ranked ahead of them and still in playoff contention. So I'm curious to see where LSU goes, and I'm curious to see where Alabama goes, because if the committee owns true and stays where they, how they've been doing things, they firmly believe in the head-to-head. They believe in honoring the head-to-head. Well, going into Death Valley and winning 42-13 is no small feat. And typically, under many circumstances, Alabama or whoever would have done such a feat would have skyrocketed in the rankings. Well, Alabama can't do that now, because if they're going to skyrocket, that more than likely means they've got to jump Tennessee. And if you're going to honor that head-to-head, you can't put Alabama above Tennessee, especially when Tennessee won that game. Tennessee's a 1-loss team. Alabama's a 2-loss team. So you go dominate a top 15 team on the road at night in a very difficult place to play, and you might only get to go up 2 or 3 spots, where normally you'd go up 5 or 6. And that's just because of how we've got to honor things here. Unless the committee throws that out the window and last week decides to honor head-to-head, but this week decides they don't. In which case, you have to start questioning, number one, where's the integrity? Number 2, what guidelines are we going by? How are we ranking these teams? Because I don't think as a committee, you can go, 1 week we're going to value this, the next week we're going to value this. 1 week we believe in the head-to-head, the next week we don't. You've got to be consistent with your logic and your reason. You've got to be. That's been an issue for the last 10 years with the committee. Has been an issue for the last 10 years. Will it be the case again tonight? So that's kind of the short version of the recap that we had for week 11 and how that could affect the rankings tonight, as we are, again, just minutes away now from seeing the rankings show. We take a look here. We just gave you our top 4, which again was Oregon, Ohio State, Texas, and Penn State. That's who I believe should be ranked 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, not the bye weeks, but 1, 2, 3, 4 tonight would be those teams. The second thing I want to talk about is the fact that we could see, not just tonight, but at the end of the year, a college football playoff that is fully dominated by the SEC and the Big Ten. So much so that you could get 9 of the 12 teams from the SEC or the Big Ten. One of those teams that is not from that conference would be Notre Dame if they went out. Obviously, your group of 5 representatives, more than likely Boise State, and then your other at-large or your other team could be, your ACC team, essentially. Could be Miami, could be SMU, could be Clemson, however you want to phrase it. But just think about it, guys. I mean, those are the top 4: Oregon, Ohio State, Texas, Penn State. Indiana's in there. Tennessee, Alabama, Ole Miss, Georgia all have a very valid case to be in there, all from the SEC. And we'll talk more about this tonight. We'll see it tonight here in just a minute, what that ends up being. But bottom line is, what I'm saying is, this is more than likely going to be a college football playoff consisting of a SEC Big Ten challenge. And you're going to see opening round games that have conference matchups. You might see rematches. You might see rivalries. You might see 2 teams play for twice in the span of 2 weeks or 3 weeks. That's very, very possible, because it's going to be really hard to avoid that when so many teams are making it from the same conference. That's just how it's going to be. I'm not against it. I'm all for it. I don't have an issue with it. If that's how it shapes out, that's how it shapes out. We just got to hope the committee does it in a correct and fair way. Again, we are now saying 3 minutes away is what it's saying, 3 minutes away. So that's what I'm looking at here is what are we looking at? I mean, again, I'll break it down for you one more time. For the teams that are in contention, we're going to count SEC and Big Ten all in one finger here. You've got Oregon, you've got Ohio State, Texas, Penn State, Indiana, Tennessee, Alabama, Ole Miss, Georgia. That's 9. And then your ACC team, Notre Dame, and your group of 5. That's 12. Now, so much more could shake out, right? Like, don't forget about Texas A&M. They're probably not going to be in the top 12 tonight. Might not be even the 13th or 14th team. But they are atop the SEC standings right now. And that's the interesting thing here, too, is the sense that you've got teams that maybe you're on the outside of the top 12. But remember, if you win your conference, at least your power conference, if you win your conference, you're getting in. You're getting in. So if A&M sitting at number 16 wins out, and that would include a win over Texas, by the way, in the season finale, which would be massive. But you do that, they're going to get in. If SMU or Clemson has 2 losses, they're kind of forgotten right now. But if Clemson makes the ACC championship and wins that, they're in. So there's a lot of teams that maybe people aren't talking about right now, but are still in the hunt for their conference championship. And if you can get to that conference championship game and win it, you're in. Same can be said for BYU or for Colorado and BYU in the top 10. Take a look at Colorado. Colorado was ranked, 20th last week? 18th, 20th, somewhere around there. Pretty far out of the top 12, but they control their own destiny to get to the Big 12 championship game. If they get there and beat a BYU, which more likely is who it would be, they will go to the college football playoff in year 2 under Deion Sanders. So don't forget about those teams. Just because you're on the outside looking in tonight, maybe not even on the graphic they put up tonight, does not mean they are completely out of contention. And if you remember back under the 4-team system, we used to have that metric of like, we've never seen a team lower than 16th in the initial rankings make the playoff. 16th now, it's pretty dang close to 12. 16-4 is a big jump compared to 16-12. So I'm thinking now you got to start talking about teams that maybe aren't even ranked that could, or at least last week, that weren't even ranked, that could maybe slip in to the college football playoff. And I think we will see more of that, not just this year, but in the years going forward if we keep this 12-team format. So very, very interesting there. Again, we are just seconds away now from seeing the Week 12 college football playoff rankings, the second set of playoff rankings that we will receive this year. For all of you watching, we have a lot of people on the stream tonight. Make sure to like the stream. Help us out. If you're new here, welcome. We're so glad you could join us at the Gridiron Expert. We are producing college football content for you year-round college football content, including weekly live streams, including weekly predictions, analysis videos, our own set of rankings that we give out every Monday. We also have some of the best spread picks in the entire country. Our expert picks goal is 100 for this year, and we are 18 away from that. And if we reach that goal, we will do a 24-hour live stream. Yes, 24-hour live stream right here on the channel. So go check it out. The link for that is down in the description below. We beat out over 80% of the national handicappers each of the last 6 years. And we also are giving out our holiday special too, which gives you every single bowl game pick, every playoff pick for the NFL, and the final 4 regular season weeks of the NFL as well. So that's almost 80 spread picks for a significantly lower price compared to our full year-long packages. So we're offering some of the lowest price in the country, some of the best picks in the entire country, and we're very close to hitting our goal. And we've got a very tried and true system that we've been running for the last 60 years that served us very, very well. So again, the link for that down in the description below of this video. We'd love to have you sign up, join our team. If you choose not to do that, that's okay. We still hope you like and subscribe and join our GE Nation anyways. So let's get to it. We're going to be bringing these up here in 1 second. I'm very anxious to see what we're dealing with here. And let's dive into it. They've got it going. They have got it going. I've got the sound turned down for copyright reasons, of course. But Tulane coming in at number 25. We had the Green Wave ranked at 24. In our GE Top 25, which is on the channel already if you want to go compare ours to that later on. They're 25. Army at 24. I think the Black Knights getting a bad rap. I think a little bit lower in the rankings than they probably should be, in my opinion. I know their strength of schedule isn't great, but Army's a dang good football team. Disagree with Missouri. I agree. Disagree with it last week. I'll disagree with it again this week. I don't think the Tigers should even be ranked at all, if you want my honest opinion. I do not believe Missouri is one of the top 25 best teams in the country as of right now. LSU, though, we just talked about the Tigers. We said, where would they be? Where would LSU be after the annihilation they suffered at home? They dropped 7 spots, remain at 22, which is exactly where we have them. South Carolina up to 21. So there you go, automatically not owning the head-to-head. LSU did beat South Carolina earlier in the year in Columbia, and yet the Gamecocks, despite having the identical record, is above them. South Carolina did beat Texas A&M. LSU did not. But LSU did beat the Gamecocks at their house, and yet South Carolina ranked 1 spot ahead of them. So already not owning up to the metrics that they kind of put in place last week. Clemson up to number 20, 3 spots for them. We've got them a little bit higher than that. Interesting there. And we'll talk more about that in a second. Louisville up to number 19. I've got them at 21. So a little bit higher than I would have had for the Cardinals, but I can't horribly disagree with it. They do own the head-to-head over Clemson, and I respect that. So Louisville at 19. Washington State, 18. I've got them at 19. Interesting. Cougars, very underrated. And Washington State's a team that could benefit from a lot of chaos ahead of them. Do I think they're a playoff team? No, but crazier things have happened. If a lot of teams start to lose, they could be in the hunt. Colorado, up to number 17. Give them the Buffalo some credit, man. I had them at 18, so not too big of a disagreement there. Colorado all the way up to number 17, still in the hunt for a Big 12 title berth and a Big 12 title as a whole. So don't rule them out, man. Deion Sanders has got this team rolling, and the schedule is pretty favorable over the next couple of weeks. So Colorado, man, what a turnaround. What a turnaround across every metric there was. Kansas State up to number 16. A little bit higher, actually, than where I had the Wildcats. And see, they own the head-to-head there. So they're giving the edge to the Kansas State. You know, they did go up. They beat Colorado in Boulder. Despite having identical records, Kansas State still owning the head-to-head. They rank them ahead of them, but they did not do the same for South Carolina and LSU. Some would say that doesn't matter. They're so low, but I would love to know the reasoning there. Texas A&M to 15. I've got them at 16. I have A&M at 16. So I can't be too upset there. Pretty spot on for where the Aggies should be. And remember, the Aggies would be in the SEC championship if the season ended right now. If the season ended right now, A&M would be in the SEC championship. There's one of those teams that aren't even going to appear on this graphic, but still have a shot at making the college football playoffs. So do not rule out Texas A&M. SMU at 14. I have them at 13. So I can respect that. ACC possible champion, maybe, who knows? But they are looking really, really good, I will say. Undefeated in conference play. Electric offense. Boise State is in. They're 13th. So this is where it always gets interesting, right? Boise State is ranked 13th, right? But would be the 12th seed as of right now, according to the playoff committee, because they are the highest ranked group of 5 champions. So people I know are inevitably are going to, it happens to me sometimes. Wow, Georgia, okay. Wow. So Georgia ranked 12th, but would be out of the college football playoff right now. If it were to happen, wow, that is interesting. That is very interesting. So Georgia loses 28-10 to Ole Miss. And I dropped the Bulldogs down to 11 because Georgia now has 2 losses. As we know, Georgia's got 2 losses now to Alabama and to Ole Miss. Neither of those teams you'd frown about, neither teams that you would say are bad teams by any means. But to see Georgia out of the playoff picture right now, it's a prime example of that group of 5 team essentially stealing a bid. They deserve their spot. The group of 5 team deserves to be in there. But essentially keeping a team like Georgia out of the picture. That's a major surprise. I'm surprised they put Georgia there. I mean, inevitably, I get it. You can't put Ole Miss out there because they just beat Georgia. You can't put Miami there because they only have 1 loss. But a very interesting move. Ole Miss coming in at 11 with the 11 seed would be in the playoff as of right now. And what a comeback for Lane Kiffin's squad too. By the way, let's give them credit. Right, kind of left for dead. I feel like a lot of people after the LSU loss, lose to Kentucky and LSU early, like you're done. Still got to play Georgia. Still got a couple of tough games on there. And then they not just beat Georgia, they crushed Georgia, and now are back in the playoff hunt. And if they win out, which is very likely, they will be in the playoffs. So what a turnaround for the Rebels in at number 11. And again, I mean, just give them credit. And this is the beauty of the format, guys, where you get 2 lost teams that are getting in, and I like that. I genuinely do. Alabama ahead of Ole Miss just barely would be the 10 seed. Interesting. Crimson Tide also have 2 losses. And it's an interesting case, right? As a committee, you have to decide how much you value the big wins, how much do you value the losses, right? Vanderbilt's not a bad team this year, but it's not the best loss in the world. But Alabama does own a win over LSU and Death Valley in dominating fashion. They do own a win over Georgia. So do the quality wins outweigh the quote unquote bad losses? That's kind of the argument you have going forward. Miami, despite being ranked 9th, plummeting a handful of spots, about 5 spots in the rankings, would be the 4 seed and get the first round bye. So isn't that interesting? A team that's ranked 9th could get a first round bye because that's how the conference works. That's how the bye weeks work. They would be the top team in the ACC, highest ranked team in the ACC, projected ACC champion, even though they're not even in the top 2 of their standings right now, and they would get in. Notre Dame, I can hear the complaints already about Northern Illinois. You know what? I give Notre Dame a lot of credit, man. They've battled back. They've won in dominating fashion, left and right. And coming in as the number 8 team, number 9 seed, Tennessee would be playing them if the playoffs started today. Tennessee, you can't argue with that much. You just can't. 8-1, they own the win over Alabama, so naturally they're going to be above them. Playing really, really good ball right now. They deserve a lot of praise. Although you wonder if Nico Iamaleava is going to be good to go going forward for this Georgia game. Got a little banged up. Haven't looked dominant in their last few wins, but still getting the job done for Josh Heupel. And then there's BYU. BYU as the 3 seed, highest ranked Big 12 team, 6th seed overall. Give them a lot of props, man. The Cougars are kind of like the new Miami in the sense of finding ways to win. The Hurricanes were finding ways to win. Barely survived Virginia Tech. Barely survived California. Found a way to come back against Duke. Unable to do so against Georgia Tech. BYU's kind of doing the same thing. They found a way to win at SMU. They found a way to come back and beat Oklahoma State. Found a way, maybe if the refs helped, to beat Utah this last Saturday. So the Cougars finding ways to win, remain undefeated. The schedule is really favorable down the stretch. Toughest remaining test is what? Arizona State, which is no slouch, by the way. Arizona State 7-2, although not getting any love in the rankings, but still 7-2. But BYU can afford a loss. They can afford to lose a game, still make the Big 12 championship. So really, BYU is in a really good spot. And if they go undefeated and lose the Big 12 championship, I'll be really interested to see what happens then. If they were to lose the Big 12 title to Kansas State, Colorado, whoever it may be, would the committee keep them in, maybe as a 10 or 11 seed, or would they boot them out? That's what I want to know. That's what I'd be curious to see. Indiana, they have been like America's team, man. They have been so much fun to watch. And they would be the 7 seed right now, despite ranked number 5, both in the AP poll and in the College Football Playoff Committee's poll. Indiana over BYU. I agree with that. Look, this is a prime example to me of the eye test, right? So many factors go into play when ranking these teams. You have to rank in obviously who they beat, where were they ranked, you take so many things into consideration. But one thing I like to take into consideration is even though Indiana does not have a great strength of schedule or strength of record or anything like that, they are dominating these opponents left and right. They have taken care of every game they're supposed to win and have done so in dominating fashion. That speaks levels to me. BYU hasn't done that. Miami hasn't done that. So that speaks levels. That plays a big role. The eye test plays a massive role. And Indiana is kind of in the same boat as BYU, where they might not make the Big Ten championship. They might lose to Ohio State, but I think it'd be very hard to leave out an Indiana team at 11-1 who's only lost, if it's close, to Ohio State and Columbus. I think it'd be hard to leave them out. So I'll be interested to see what they do if that in fact happens. If it doesn't, Indiana gets a win at Ohio State, goes to the Big Ten championship, win or lose, they're in. Penn State, number 4, which means they'd be the 6th seed. We get a rematch of last year's Peach Bowl. If that held, Ole Miss and Penn State, this time, though, in Happy Valley. What a game that would be. Texas, the highest-ranked SEC team at number 3, would get that 2 seed. We know Oregon's going to be the 1 seed, which means Ohio State would be the 5 seed, despite being ranked number 2. And once again, that is just a prime example of how this playoff system works and how crazy it is. The fact that you could be the number 2 ranked team in these rankings But when it's time to play the games in the playoff, you would be the 5 seed and would have to play in the opening round, not get a first round bye. And I'm for that. No one wants to see, at least in my eyes, no one wants to see the number 1, 2, 3, 4 seeds all get a first round bye. No one wants to see them all come from the same conference. I don't think any of us would want to see the first four teams be, Alabama, Georgia, Ole Miss, Tennessee, or Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State, Indiana. Like, I don't think we want that. You want some parity. There should be value. You should be rewarded for winning your conference. And that's why those bye weeks are the way that they are and structured the way that they are. So that's your playoff picture, guys. Those are your playoff rankings. And we'll go through them a little bit more here in 1 second. I pull them back up now. They're officially posted. I can look at them with my own eyes. Give us our initial reaction. So you kind of got our live reactions as we went through. Let's start at the bottom and work our way back up. And again, welcome to the Gridiron Expert. If you're just now joining us, the College Football Playoff Committee has released their new set of rankings, and it's no longer projected. If I can fix this. Let's see here. No longer projected. That's your top 4: Oregon, Ohio State, Texas, and Penn State, which is exactly how we had it here at the Gridiron Expert when we released our rankings yesterday. Again, go take a look at our rankings. We released them here on the channel with a full video with explanation. Some people don't. The committee doesn't really do that. The committee just puts out these rankings and says nothing. We come out and actually back up our picks with our logic. But we did agree with the committee in terms of the top 4 teams: Oregon, Ohio State, Texas, Penn State. But I'll start at the bottom and work our way back up. Love that Tulane's in there. Love that Army's in there. I think this creates an interesting conversation. If Boise State loses a game somewhere. I don't know if they will or who it could be to. They have an interesting, maybe tricky game this week against San Jose State. The Spartans, man, they've got a pretty good offense. I'll give them props there. They've got a pretty good offense. So maybe they could give Boise State a run for their money. And then if Boise State gets to the Mountain West Championship, they will more than likely have to play UNLV again. We saw how close that game was the first time just a few weeks ago. If UNLV wins that game, they're not going to go to the playoff. That would open the door more than likely for the American champion. That could be Army. That could be Tulane. Both teams are ranked right now, but it creates this conversation of, all right, could a 2-loss Boise State still get in? Probably not, because they're not going to be a Mountain West champion, right? You've got to give it to the highest ranked conference champion, right? Which, believe it or not, means that if Boise State loses and Army loses to Notre Dame, which is very, very possible, but Army still beats Tulane or whoever it is in the American Championship, the Black Knights could still get into the college football playoff if they deem them worthy enough to be ranked as the highest one. Do you put them above? Do they slip in UNLV into the top 25 and crown them as champion? Like, you can't help but wonder where they'd be in the grand scheme of things. But we now have 3 group of 5 teams ranked. Boise is ahead by a long shot, but they are 1 loss away from making this race very, very interesting. So we will keep an eye out on that over these last few weeks. I still disagree with really number 21 through 23 is really bad. And I know people don't really care that much about that because that doesn't affect the playoff race per se, but at least Eli Drinkwitz believes it does. Eli Drinkwitz believes that Missouri still has playoff hopes. They don't. They absolutely do not. But I don't understand the logic here. I don't get how, LSU got beat really bad against Alabama. And maybe that's the committee's logic. Maybe the committee's logic is LSU lost 42-13 against Alabama at home. South Carolina lost to Alabama by 2 in Tuscaloosa. Maybe that's their logic is, who lost by less, who looked better in their loss. But I don't like that logic. A loss is a loss, a win is a win. And even though it was earlier in the year, even though maybe teams weren't fully healthy or anything like that, LSU did beat South Carolina in Columbia back in week 3. So the fact that South Carolina is above LSU, despite the fact that they both had the exact same record, it's kind of interesting to me. And I disagree with it. And really, it's a pretty similar structure. Maybe they're banking it off the fact that LSU has 2 blowout losses and South Carolina has 2 narrow losses to LSU and Alabama. The narrow losses outweighing the blowout losses. I don't know. And again, I get it's just one spot, but I don't see how you can put South Carolina above LSU and then tell people that you believe in the head-to-head. I don't believe that. I don't know how you can do that. So I disagree with that. I disagree with Missouri being ranked as a whole. I don't think Missouri is a top 25 team. I know they are 7-2. Who have they beat? Who have they beat? Again, kind of if I think the committee, from what I'm picking up, is really valuing. I don't know. If the committee was actually taking into account the margin of loss, then Missouri definitely should not be ranked, because the two toughest games Missouri has had, they lost 41-10 to Texas A&M and 34-0 to Alabama. And I know they weren't fully healthy in that game, but still shut out against Alabama, who was kind of reeling at the time. Missouri's best win is probably against Boston College or in overtime against Vanderbilt. Probably so. That's nothing to brag about in my eyes. I know Vanderbilt's solid this year. I get it. Better than they've been in many, many years. But that's still not a lot to brag about. So Missouri, to me, is not doing it for me. I know they're not fully healthy. I know they've struggled. But I think that South Carolina will probably mop the floor with them this Saturday in Columbia, assuming they're fully healthy. Even if Brady Cook comes back and is okay, I don't think they stand much of a chance against this hot South Carolina team. South Carolina has destroyed Oklahoma and Norman. They destroyed Texas A&M, and they destroyed Vanderbilt in Nashville. So 3 straight blowout victories for a team that is firing on all cylinders. Missouri, congrats, you're ranked. You probably will not be for long after this. Disagree with them being at 23. Louisville's above Clemson. Okay, honor the head-to-head. Washington State's at 18. I like the Cougars, man. They are fun to watch. They've got a god-awful defense, but that offense is fun. That offense is fun to watch for Washington State. And like we mentioned, maybe the Pac-12 finds a way to get into the college football playoff. I doubt it. I highly doubt it. It would take a lot of chaos. And again, the Cougars don't really have a great strength of schedule, and their one loss this year was to Boise State. But, crazy things have happened. We got 3 weeks left in the regular season and then conference championship week. So if the Cougars go 11-1, I could see them having the argument of saying, hey, we deserve to flirt with the top 12 spot, especially if teams proceed to lose ahead of them. Like if Georgia loses to Tennessee, they're out of the equation. If SMU drops a few, they're out of the equation. If A&M loses one more game, they're probably out of the equation. And there's a good chance the Aggies do lose to Texas in the season finale. So, there's opportunity for Washington State to move up. If you're looking for a team that can be the sleeper, maybe it's the Cougars, although, again, I highly doubt it because of how poor their strength of schedule is. Kansas State above Colorado. They're owning the head-to-head there. So they give the edge to the Wildcats over Colorado in the head-to-head. Don't do the same for LSU and South Carolina. They honor the head-to-head for Louisville and Clemson. I'm trying to think of other places where they honor head-to-head for teams that pretty much have identical records. Ole Miss above Georgia, yes. Obviously, Tennessee above Alabama, but the Volunteers have 1 loss. Bama has 2. For the most part, it's not terrible. Obviously, someone goes, well, what about A&M and South Carolina? Again, some of that's different. The cases are somewhat different. A&M at the time was a top 10 team. South Carolina was unranked. You're not going to catapult the Gamecocks, into the top 15 when they were hardly receiving any votes from the AP or even from the, the committee. Moses, he talks too much. Type the top 12s in. He's in the police academy. Moses, are you listening? Are you listening? Here you go. Listen closely. I'm going to give you the top. You got the top 4 on the screen, and then we'll keep going through our rankings. It's a live stream. Naturally, we're going to talk, Moses. That's how it works. Your 1, 2, 3, 4 is Oregon, Ohio State, Texas, and Penn State. That's your top 4. And then you have Indiana at number 5, BYU at number 6, Tennessee at number 7, Notre Dame at number 8, Miami at number 9, Alabama at number 10, Ole Miss 11, Georgia 12. That is your top 12, and we're getting to that shortly. Let's get to it right now. Boise State's the highest ranked group of 5 team. We expected that. They would be in right now as a 12 seed, and I sure as heck wouldn't want to play them, especially with Ashton Jeanty in the backfield. Ashton Jeanty as the Heisman Trophy favorite probably should just be given the Heisman Trophy now with as well as he's playing. I don't know. Cam Ward's Heisman Trophy campaign took a big hit after that bad performance against Georgia Tech. Don't believe Travis Hunter should get it. Yeah, sure. Send him to New York for an invite. Let him be in attendance, but he does not deserve it. Ashton Jeanty deserves it, and I think ultimately will get it. If he doesn't, I lose a lot of faith in the Heisman Trophy ceremony and the proceedings for that. Into the top 12. Into the top 12. I think the biggest shock for me tonight was Georgia, who was ranked 12th, but if the playoffs started today, would be the first team out because of just the way the other conferences stack up and because of Boise State being the group of 5 team. So they are ranked 12th, but they would be the first team out if the playoffs began today. That was what was shocking to me. But from a logical standpoint, it makes sense. Because where would you put Georgia? You cannot put Georgia above Ole Miss or Alabama. They all have 2 losses. Georgia lost to both of them. So you can't put them there. You cannot put them above Tennessee, although that could very well happen next week, next Tuesday, when we're back here with another live stream. They very well could be there because Georgia plays Tennessee on Saturday. If they beat the Volunteers, and I think a lot of people believe that they will, we'll have our prediction for that tomorrow, by the way, then they're good to go. Tennessee at 7, Georgia at 12. Georgia would propel back into the top 10, especially if they win in dominating fashion. They'd be back in the top 10. Tennessee would probably tumble out. And then you would see a scenario where, despite owning the head-to-head, Alabama would probably be ahead of Tennessee. So that was probably the biggest surprise. After that, Alabama above Ole Miss makes sense. Alabama, another prime example, though. We talked about it right before the stream started. In a normal year, in a normal set of rankings, Alabama or any team that goes into Death Valley and wins by 29 points would have skyrocketed in the rankings, and rightfully so. Alabama did not do that. You could argue that Alabama should be ranked ahead of Miami. I think you can argue that. I know Miami only has 1 loss and Alabama has 2, but Miami's strength of schedule nowhere near as good as Alabama's, who does have a win over LSU and Georgia. Who has Miami beat? That's worthy enough. Really nobody. Louisville is their best win, I would say. Forgot about that, the shootout. So that's kind of the argument at hand there. I think maybe that's my only discrepancy. And they put Alabama there. Notre Dame, it's fine. I might have the Fighting Irish a little bit higher, if I'm being completely honest with you. How is Indiana above BYU? Someone asked. Once again, going back to it, it's the eye test. Indiana's been dominant. BYU, not so much. They're both undefeated. They both deserve to be ranked very high. But if I was betting against those teams right now, they were to face off on a neutral site tomorrow, I'm picking Indiana. They are physical defensively. They are phenomenal offensively. I'm picking Indiana to win that game on a neutral site if it were to happen. And again, that's just the fact of the matter. The eye test matters. How you win matters because we can see through that. BYU, we know, probably should not have won that game. A win is a win. It counts on the record. They don't deserve to be punished for a controversial win. But we definitely can look at that and go, they shouldn't have won. And that plays a role in where a team is ranked. That's the mindset I have there. And I'm fine with it. And I just want to say how the tables have turned, honestly, in the college football landscape. I mean, in so many years past, we saw the SEC dominate the top of the standings, right? The SEC was just 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 4, 5, whatever. Now it's the Big Ten. And again, I think this playoff is going to be pretty much dominated by the SEC and the Big Ten anyway. We talked about that. It's going to be a pretty dominant field out of the 12. I think it'd be. I'm sorry, I got the Champions Classic over here too, multitasking. But out of the 12, we think 9 could be from the SEC or the Big Ten. But out of the top 5, 4 of them reside in the Big Ten: Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State, and Indiana. And again, a lot of that is because of the conference realignment, or the number one team in the country was a team that wasn't even in the Big Ten last year. But regardless, tables have turned. The Big Ten is dominating more so right now than the SEC, although the SEC no slouch with 3 teams in the top 10 and 5 teams in the top 12. Yeah, that's not too bad at all. So with that, we're going to take your questions. We're going to take your comments. We'll just do the chat tonight. How about that? We'll just make it easier. For everybody involved as we progress for these next few minutes. I'm gonna answer as many as I can. Again, I want to say hello to everybody that's here. We got Alex TV, Jerry Turner, Brady Glassman, our regulars, our good friend Robert and Flobe, and Moses is a new guy now. Hopefully he heard us. Scotty B, the Baylor King. Doggy's good to see you. OC54, Hunter Shin, so good to see you. Zach Harris here as well. So a lot of guys here that are both old and new, regulars, not so much regulars. We're still glad to have you. Again, make sure to like this live stream, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and check out everything down in the description below. We'd love for you guys to join our GE Nation, everything that we're building here at our channel. So again, check it out. The link's down in the description below. All right, let's just find a comment and start from there. Definitely, I'm curious to get a lot of your thoughts from these rankings. And some of you guys, I could see them coming in, had some very interesting comments. Let's see here. Let's see. Evan says the SEC and Big Ten combined can only have 8 teams together. If Notre Dame makes it, that would be 9. ACC champion is 10. Big 12 champion is 11. Okay, so that's okay. Evan, good point. That's a very good point. I guess I was leaving out BYU, the Big 12 champ. So you're right. 8 teams is all they can do because you're guaranteed the 2 other power conferences put you at 10 this year. In the sense, if Notre Dame got in, that'd be 11, and your group of 5 would be 12. So my correction, 8 is the max. Very good catch, Evan. Thank you for that. Still, though, 2/3 of the playoff would be from the SEC and Big Ten. I think that's pretty dang impressive if it happens. That speaks levels, man. That speaks levels, just the level of competition. And that's not a secret. That's not a secret. We've seen it. We've seen the level of competition in the SEC and Big Ten as compared to that of the ACC and Big 12. The Big 12 is pretty wild this year. It's been pretty competitive, pretty wild, but not many elite teams by any means. BYU, obviously the best. Kansas State, no slouch, but there hasn't been any team that's over the top. So more than likely this year, ACC and Big 12 are a 1-bid league. You could make the argument for a 2-bid league in the Big 12. The best case for the Big 12 to get 2 teams in, ironically, would be for BYU to go undefeated, to lose the Big 12 championship game to whoever they play. Whoever beats them gets in as the champion, and the committee puts a 1-loss BYU team into the playoff. That's their best way to get 2 teams in. But even then, I don't know if that's going to happen. You're going to see a lot of controversy, I think, over the next couple of weeks, definitely on Selection Sunday, over the next few years, where a team, say like BYU, goes undefeated, loses their conference championship, and gets left out, and instead of them being in, they put in a 2-loss SEC or Big Ten team. That's going to happen. That's inevitably going to happen. You're going to see teams with 2 losses, some cases 3 on occasion, getting in over a team that maybe has a 1-loss or whatever it may be. And they're going to point to strength of schedule. They're going to point to the eye test. They're going to point to injuries, just like we saw last year with Florida State. If we see another instance like that, where, if you win your conference, if this system had been in place last year, Florida State would have been in because they would have been ACC champs, and there's no arguing that. But, if they are an undefeated team and they lose a game and they're like, we still deserve to go, and they're like, nah, you're starting quarterbacks out. You're not going to be that competitive. You're not getting in. That will happen inevitably again to some team, which is really, really unfortunate, but it's bound to happen. So definitely something to watch out for there. Let's see here. See where the comments are. We just got see. This is an interesting conversation here. Colorado State controls its own destiny in the Mountain West and doesn't play UNLV. So, and isn't that interesting? And is that Colorado State is probably not a playoff team by any means if they were to win the Mountain West, but the Rams have a sneaky good team. They're not being talked about nearly enough. They are severely underrated offensively, got a pretty dang good offense. if they somehow pull off the upset against Boise State in the Mountain West Championship game, Boise maybe gets eliminated from playoff contention. It opens the door for Army or Tulane in the American, or if both of those teams maybe struggle down the stretch and maybe take a loss, if Tulane takes a third loss to Navy, third loss of the year, loses to Navy this Saturday, and Army gets blown out by Notre Dame, and neither team is good enough to be ranked if they win the American, then what do you do? What do you do if there is no high-ranked Group of 5 champion? You know what I'm saying? What if Colorado State beats Boise State? What if the American champion doesn't deserve to be ranked or really isn't that good? We know it's not going to be a team from the MAC. We know it's not going to be a team from the Sun Belt. So what do you do? What do you do? That's a very interesting concept and a very interesting scenario. Do I think it'll happen this year? No, because I think Boise State's, I'm not going to say it's got it in the bag. Nothing's ever in the bag, but are looking really, really good. But again, crazier things have happened. So excellent points on Colorado State. You guys have mentioned it. So Alex mentioned it. I saw OC said it. So excellent points. Hunter, good to see you. Yeah, a lot of inconsistencies. Like we mentioned, especially in the lower end. Again, are they valuing a head-to-head? Are they not? Are we valuing eye test? Are we actually giving credit to losses now? And what are we doing? The only argument I'll have with that, Hunter, with Penn State is, yes, they have a loss. Indiana does not. But look at who Penn State has beat, I guess. They've taken care of business in every other game, maybe some higher quality wins to an extent, not by much. I'm pulling up their schedule right now for us to look at. And maybe, I think in a way, Hunter, they're comparing margin of victories to other people. Margin of victories and margin of losses. I think that's why South Carolina is actually ranked ahead of LSU, is because they said, hey, look, South Carolina lost to Alabama by 2 and LSU lost by 29. And Carolina did that on the road. So I think that's why that's the way it is, in my opinion. I think that's kind of what we're looking at here. But you look at Penn State. They've got a road win against West Virginia. They've got, at the time, was a top 20 win over Illinois. They've got a 16-point win over UCLA team that's getting better. Road win at USC. Road win at Wisconsin. Only losses by 7 to Ohio State, which is not bad at all. So that's kind of, I think, what they're looking at right now. And then Penn State did beat Washington by 29 points. Indiana did so by 11? So, by 14. So I think in a way they're valuing margin of victory. I'm trying to think of another common opponent. I mean, Penn State beat UCLA by 16. I think Indiana did it by 29. I don't know. It's interesting. It's definitely interesting. And I think part of them is also like, look, Penn State's toughest test has been Ohio State. They lost that game by 7. Indiana's toughest test has been Michigan, Washington. They haven't played Ohio State yet. So let's see what happens when they do play Ohio State, not this Saturday, but next Saturday. So I'm not opposed to that. I'm fine with Penn State. I'm fine with Penn State being ahead of Indiana. I really am. I really am okay with that. And again, it's not by a whole lot either. Doggy, good to see you. Do I think there's a chance an 11-1 Boise State can get a bye over the? Yes, I do. 100% I do. 100%, because here's the thing. Boise was ranked, 13th? Yeah, they were 13th, I think, in the rankings today, which would give them the 12 seed. The Big 12 champion, if it's not BYU, is more than likely going to be Colorado or Kansas State, who are both on the lower end right now. Boise's pretty high up. You're telling me that if those teams win out and then beat BYU, you would have to propel them, a potential 2-loss Big 12 champion if they take down BYU, ahead of a 1-loss Boise, who has won every game in pretty good fashion, has a big double-digit win over a ranked Washington State team, and their only loss came in the final seconds to Oregon, at Oregon, the number 1 team in the country. So I think there's I'm keeping an eye on both games here. I think there's a very good chance that could happen. There's a very good chance that could happen. And how awesome would that be, right? And here's the thing. Even if that doesn't happen, even if Boise doesn't get a bye week necessarily, there's a good chance Boise State can rise up the ranks enough to get them to host a first-round playoff game. That's what I think. That is possible. Again, there's so many opportunities for teams to lose, and rambling here, but it's a lot to discuss. How do you punish like Boise State? Hear me out. All right, just back up. Georgia plays Tennessee. One of those teams is going to lose. If Georgia loses, that's their third loss. They're pretty much done, more than likely. Tennessee loses, that's their second loss. They're not completely done, but that's their second loss. Boise's got one. Tennessee's 7? Boise State's 13. Not that big of a gap there. If Tennessee loses by 20-plus points, I think that gap gets smaller. Maybe you argue Boise gets ahead of them. Maybe. Right? One of them is going to lose. Indiana or Ohio State is going to lose, not this Saturday, but next Saturday. It's going to happen. Ohio State is either going to take their second loss or Indiana is going to take their first. And then you wonder what the committee will do to Indiana when that happens. You wonder what the committee would do to Indiana if they go, hey, you took your first loss to Ohio State. Let's say they lose by 13. You haven't really played anybody. How far do they plummet down the rankings? Do they get out? What I'm trying to say is the teams that are ahead of Boise State have much tougher schedules, and a lot of them are going to lose over the last 4 weeks of the year. And the last 4 weeks includes conference championship weekend, which means there's a lot of room to move up for Boise. A lot of room. And we've seen how crazy this season can be. No one's safe on any given weekend. So I believe, yes, Boise State can get a first-round bye, but at the very least, we could see an opening round game on the Smurf turf of the college football playoff. And that would just be awesome. First year of the 12-team playoff, and Boise State, the group of 5 team who, back in the preseason, and I'm kind of guilty of it to an extent, back in the preseason, everybody kind of relegated whoever the group of 5 team was going to be, relegated them to that 12 seed, right? It was kind of like, yeah, they're going to have the weakest strength of schedule. They're not going to be that good. They're going to get in, put them at 12. They'll lose to Texas or Ohio State, and we'll be done with it. Well, now, I mean, I don't think anybody was prepared for maybe Boise to be this good. Was prepared for Army to maybe be in the hunt. So, and our Army gets it, they'll be the 12 seed. But regardless, yes, long story short, yes, there's a very good chance, not just a chance, a very good chance, because a lot of teams are going to be losing ahead of Boise State. If Boise keeps winning convincingly, taking care of business, wins their conference championship convincingly, it's going to be really hard. Even though their strength of schedule is not nearly as good as an SEC team or a Big Ten team or whoever it may be, it's going to be really hard to not give them a much higher seed when they're 11-1. And again, they've got the Heisman Trophy winner on their roster. I believe he will be the Heisman Trophy winner. And their lone loss was by 3 points on the road against what is more than likely going to be the number 1 overall seed in this playoff. The only other team that's given Oregon that good of a test was Ohio State. So definitely would keep that in mind. I would keep that in mind if I'm the committee and things play out that way over these next couple of weeks. So yeah, that's kind of my mindset there. Daniel Bird, good to see you, Daniel. Nice to see you. Long time no talk. Daniel. Good to see you. Glad you're here. Glad to have you on board. I'm still a member of the GE Nation. I know a lot of you guys, we don't always get to see your comments or calls or anything like that, but we know you're still with us and we always appreciate you. So Daniel, happy to have you, man. Happy for your Nittany Lions. I know the Ohio State loss was tough, but the 12-team playoff was like meant for you, right? Like, I mean, for so many years, that Ohio State loss typically would have ended your season. That playoff hopes are done. This year, no. Penn State pretty much looking like a lock for the college football playoff as long as they don't slip up anywhere. And I'd love to see them. I'd love to see them not only make it, but get to host a game in Happy Valley would just be electric. Maybe we can have a second whiteout game. Maybe we can coordinate that for the college football playoff that Penn State gets to host one. But Daniel, good to see you, man, or hear from you, and thank you for your support. Doggy, absolutely, man. I know you're a big BYU guy. I know you've got to be excited with where your program's at. But both those teams over in that western mountain region of the country, I have tremendous amount of respect for them as well. I've had the honor of going to BYU once, not for a game. I got to go and do a prediction video from there, but definitely want to get to the Smurf turf at some point. But I admire you and your respect for acknowledging a respect for, in a way, a bit of a rival in the region. So I love it, man. I love it. He says it was a correct holding call. You know what? I'm not even going to get into it, man. I'm not upset about it. I'm not upset about the call. I mean, I had no dog in the fight. Pun intended, maybe for your username. I didn't have a dog in the fight. I was just wanting to watch a good game. It's one of those things where sometimes you hate to see a game that's that good end in such controversial fashion on such a I don't want to say bad call, but a unfortunate call to end such a great game. But to play devil's advocate, if you're a Utah fan that thinks you got robbed, if you want to play devil's advocate, Utah had every opportunity to win that game. They were backed up in the shadow of their own of the goalpost, man. And the holding call screwed them up, sure, but they had an opportunity to get a stop. They still had to go another 30, 40 plus yards to get in field goal range. Didn't get the stop. They needed to score. Didn't Utah get shut out in the second half? So the offense was pretty solid in the first half, completely shut down the second half. That's on them. So I think a lot of the times you can look at so many games that end in that controversial fashion and say the refs screwed us over, the refs cost us this game, the refs did this, and it's like, yeah, that's what stands out in our mind so well. But a lot of the time, you got to look at the whole body of work, the whole 60 minutes, and go, yeah, that one call was wrong and screwed up, but you shouldn't have blown this lead. You shouldn't have done this. I remember a couple weeks ago, people were livid that California-Miami game, where it probably should have been a targeting call Miami in the final seconds there, which would have given Clemson California win. But bottom line is that targeting call should never have mattered because California shouldn't have blown a 25-point lead, right? California was doing everything right. They choked the game away. That game had no business coming down to whether they're targeting or not, So there's always two sides of the story, man. One team feels like they got absolutely robbed. The other team's ecstatic and maybe breathing a sigh of relief. At the end of the day, though, you got to look at the entire picture. You got to look at the full 60 minutes, not just the final, 60 seconds. I saw a great question up here a second ago that I wanted to touch on. Two, actually. OC 54. Does BYU remind me of TCU a little bit? Ooh, man. There's similarities. But BYU could actually play some defense, though. TCU didn't have the best defense in the world. They found themselves in they had a couple of good defensive games, but offense was great. That Duggan and Johnson and all those guys were so much fun to watch. Defense, not so much. BYU has got, I'm not going to say more talent, but it's hard to make the argument, man. If you look at the way the regular season went down, they're both very similar. TCU was just getting by every single week. BYU, for the most part this year, has been getting by every single week. BYU has had more dominant victories, maybe more impressive coast-to-coast victories than TCU really ever did during that stretch, BYU's ability to go to UCF, when it was not much of anything this year, but to go to Orlando and dominate. Their ability to have some no-sweat games have been impressive. TCU, we saw a lot of games that came down to those final few seconds. I think what they said, they won 13 games, right? And 7 or 8 of them were decided by one possession. So that's one thing that I've got that I think is interesting there. But I think the biggest thing for BYU that we've got to watch out for as we progress into the playoff field is basically what's their first round matchup. That's what I want to see. TCU played Michigan, beat them, crazy game. Don't know how it happened. Still don't know how it happened to this day. But what does BYU get in a first round matchup? Do they get a first round bye? Do they win the Big 12 and go undefeated and get a first round bye? Do they lose a game and get put at the 8 or the 9 or the 10 or the 11? Do they get to host a game in Provo? That's a tough place to play. It is not easy. So does BYU host a game in Provo? I mean, obviously, you want that first round bye, get you one step closer to a national title. But so that's kind of what I'm looking at if I'm BYU. And really anybody. Is they're a good team? They're a very talented team. They're a very well coached and disciplined team. Whether or not they're a first round exit or not, or whether a bust in the playoff is who they draw. I will say this. The first round bye is great. You get to go to a neutral site, no true road game. There's a lot at stake there. But let's say they get the 4 seed. Let's hypothetically say they get the 4 seed as a Big 12 champ. That means they would play the winner of the 5-12. Who's going to be that 5? Think about that for a second. The 5 would be Ohio State as of right now, right? If the playoff ended today, Ohio State would be the 5. Are you picking BYU to beat Ohio State? Even if it's at a neutral site, let's put it at the Fiesta Bowls. Put it down in Arizona. I don't know where it would be. It's going to be one of the New Year's 6 locations. Are you taking Ohio State over BYU? I'm not. Ohio State would be favored maybe by 10, 14 points, maybe a little bit less, who knows? But most of us would pick Ohio State to win that game. Can BYU truly match up with the Buckeyes? Let's say it's not Ohio State. Let's say it's Texas. Are you taking BYU to take Texas? Probably not. So in a way, you almost wonder, it's a double-edged sword. If you're BYU, it's not just a matter of who that reminds me of or anything like that, but it's also a matter of what do you want if you're BYU? Do you want to get the first round bye, get that extra week of prep? Or do you go, hey, maybe it'd be better if we got the, I don't know. You want to host the game at home. I don't know. I'm just thinking, what's going to be the best path that happens in every set of playoffs we got? NFL playoffs, NBA playoffs, college football playoffs. What is your path to victory? What is your path to success? What's it going to be? And some teams somehow get an easier path. I'm not going to get into it deeper here, but take last year for the Boston Celtics. Great team in the NBA. Deserved to win that championship. But what a Mickey Mouse easy path to the title did they have, right? They played a banged up Miami Heat squad that didn't have Jimmy Butler. And the next round, they played the Cavaliers, who were also banged up significantly. And then the next round, they played the Indiana Pacers, who made a surprising run to the conference finals. Got banged up a little bit down the road there. And again, a Pacers team that probably shouldn't have been there in the first place. Everybody thought it could be the Bucks, thought it could be the Knicks, who would have given a better fight. Then they go to the NBA Finals. Who they play? No, not the Nuggets, not the number 1 seed. No, they play the 5 seed Dallas Mavericks, who were good, but not that great. So not to take away from their finals run or anything. So it all comes down to the run, man. How do things line up for you? How do they line up for you? And that's going to be what ultimately determines the success of BYU's playoff run, is how does it run it? And we've got to keep in mind, BYU's got to make it. BYU's got to make it. We're acting like it's a lock right now. They're the top team in the Big 12, and they'd be in it today, but season's not over. They've got some tough games down the stretch. They've got to play Arizona State, who's no slouch. I see some of you guys maybe a little weary of Kansas, who just beat Iowa State, so it ain't over. It ain't over. It ain't over at all. Let's see here. That was a long rant on BYU. I'm sure Doggy loved that. Alex, good to see you. Could Michigan State beat Illinois this Saturday, and will they make a bowl game? Then the last games are home against Purdue and Rutgers. What's Michigan State's record? Do they really have 5 wins already? They're 4-5. Okay, they're 4-5. So I was surprised to see that spread as low as it was, Alex. I mean, 2.5 points is not big at all. I mean, they're clearly valuing Michigan State quite a bit here. Illinois is a 6-3 team. Hasn't looked good these last few weeks. Now coming out of their bye week for this game. So I don't think they're going to beat Illinois, although I think they're going to play them pretty close. I think you're going to beat Purdue. I think, Alex, ultimately comes down to Rutgers. I think you're probably looking at a 5-6 Michigan State team taking on a Rutgers team that could also be 5-6. Could be a bold. Who knows? Rutgers got to play Maryland and Illinois. So that Rutgers game at the end of the year in East Lansing is massive. That will determine whether or not you go bowling. But Alex, I'll say this. Look, I'd love to see Michigan State go bowling. I truly would. I think it'd be awesome. Even if you don't, you guys have exceeded expectations this year. We looked at the roster. A lot of us did across the country because they don't have much talent. First-year head coach in Jonathan Smith coming over from Oregon State. Knew it was going to be a massive rebuilding project after the absolute mess left behind from the Mel Tucker era. And you're 4-5, which is probably more wins than a lot of us expected. You've been more competitive in games than we expected. You pulled off a handful of upsets. No one, I think, probably thought they'd beat Iowa. No one thought they'd go on the road and beat Maryland. Yet here they are. So if you go bowling, what a job well done. Even if you don't, you go 5-7 or something like that. While disappointing to have missed, that's still a heck of a spot, heck of a performance, and a heck of a season from Jonathan Smith. And clearly the future is looking pretty dang bright. So that's a great question. Going to be an interesting game in the Big Ten there. It has no impact on the standings or the playoff race or anything like that, but it'll be a fun game nonetheless. Do I think Arizona State has a chance to make it interesting and pull up the upset? Yeah, I do. I do think they've got a very good chance. Cam Scatterboo, man. When Scatterboo comes back and is fully healthy, watch out. Watch out, man. He can do some nasty stuff. He's been a great running back, one of those underrated backs in the nation this year. Yeah, I said it, the nation. So, yeah, I think they have a very good chance to make it interesting. BYU's got to be careful, man. We talked about they've been getting by. Narrowly getting by all those teams that we mentioned. Don't overlook Kansas. Kansas is a much better team than the record showed. We saw that last week against Iowa State. Arizona State is 7-2, playing very good and inspired football. Would love nothing more than to pull off the upset over BYU. That's going to be a very tough game. And then if BYU does make the Big 12 championship, they cannot afford to overlook Colorado is what's looking like right now. But let's say it's Kansas State. Colorado's tough enough as it is. If they play Kansas State, they beat Kansas State the first time because of all the mistakes that Kansas State made. BYU deserved to win that game. They played a phenomenal football game, but they were really being held in check for like the first 28 minutes of the first half, and then Kansas State just collapsed, and that collapse carried over into the second half. BYU won that game primarily off of Kansas State mistakes and turnovers. So that won't happen again if they play again in the Big 12 championship. So the Big 12 title race is far from over. BYU is far from a lot to the playoff. Going to be very, very interesting to see what happens over the next couple of weeks. 1 second, guys. Got to take a break 1 second. I'll be right back. Turn on the camera, and we're going to come back and wrap up. 1 second. All right. Sorry about that. Had to step aside for a second. Wrapping up tonight. Just last few questions before we officially call tonight. A little bit shorter than usual. Typically, that's what happens when we do these live shows with the live reactions. Next week, we're going to have a much better one. We're going to have a guest with us to kind of make it like a real show. We're going to watch it live with you. Then we're going to bring in our guest analyst, kind of come talk about these rankings. His reaction, our reaction, your reactions, everybody's reaction is going to be a great time. And we'll be doing that next week. So don't miss out on that. Next week, it will return to the normal time, Tuesday at 6 o'clock Central Time. This week was obviously an anomaly because, an outlier because of the Champions Classic in basketball. We're not going to have that next week. So it's going to be much better for us. Definitely looking forward to that. Last few things I wanted to address here was Alex saying that you can make the argument Kansas should be 9-0 or 8-1. And that's what I'm saying, man. They are a much better team than their record shows. Kansas is 3-6. I mean, remember in the preseason, man, we thought they could be a Big 12 title contender. So much talent coming back. I'd love to do a deeper dive into Kansas to see where it all went wrong. But, I mean, look at this. 1 possession loss to Illinois, a 1 possession loss to UNLV, a 1 possession loss to West Virginia, a 1 possession loss to Arizona State, a game they easily should have won or really should have won. 1 possession loss to Kansas State. 3-6, 5 1-possession losses. So very, very true, Alex. Probably could be a 9-0, 8-1 team. And that's heartbreaking. Heartbreaking if you're a Kansas fan. We've seen it time and time again, though. And that's actually one of my favorite things to do in college football is the just kind of the argument of like, what would your record be if you had won those close games? Where would you stand if you had taken care of business in the final moments? that's always what I just love doing. And Kansas is one of those teams. Arkansas is another prime team. Arkansas does that all the time. Blows leads, loses by one possession, and you go, man, Arkansas would be a 7-2, 8-1 team, playoff contender. Maybe not this year per se. They've gotten blown out a few times, but if you go back and look historically, yeah, they Arkansas is a team that probably could have been a dynasty. And I'm not just saying that. Go back and look at the amount of games they've lost by one possession on a given year, and a Razorback team that could perennially every year be winning at least 8 games and contending in the SEC, and they just can't do it. So Kansas kind of in that book here, or in that boat. And then finally, great way to wrap up with a fun little joke here. Akron and Kent State. Doggy, the best way to do that game is to get yourself a lot of beverages, and just kick back. And maybe when you wake up, it's a great overtime thriller. Maybe it's a 3-2 caliber game. I don't know what's going to happen with that one. God, it is going to be absolutely nasty. So ugly, Akron and Kent State. But you know what I like to say? I've had guys ask me about that before. And I've been caught before, like in midweek, midweek action, NFL preseason, games that sometimes don't matter. And this Akron Kent State game does not matter. It matters to them. But why? Why would you waste your time watching such a horrible game, such a boring game, whatever it may be? I do it because it's football, man. We do it because it's football. Like, I don't care what level it is, how good the teams are. Obviously, we want to watch higher quality games. Obviously, we want to see. I'm watching a high quality basketball game right here. Obviously, you want to watch, all these teams, But football is football. Football is football, and I would never pass it up for anything, man. Never going to pass up an opportunity to watch anything on any given Saturday, on any given Tuesday, any given Wednesday. I'm taking it, man. I'm taking it. So I tell you what, with that, I say what's called tonight. College football guy, guys, at the tail end of this one, man. The tail end of this one, college football guy. We'll see you on Tuesday. For our next college football live stream, playoff rankings show. It's going to be a fun one. Going to be a really fun one. Hopefully I have a guest on, ready to break everything down. And we'll see what happens over the next couple of days, man. We'll see what happens. This is going to be a wild week 12. Not many huge, big time games or anything like that, but ones that are definitely going to shape the playoff rankings, games that are going to play an impact. We've seen these rankings get shaken up every single week. I would expect nothing less by next Tuesday. So with that, you guys have a great rest of your night. Hunter Shin, Doggy, College Football Guy, Alex TV, OC54, Robert, Austin Pruitt, Flobe, Jerry Turner, Brady Glassman, all of you guys that have been here tonight, that have been here for many, many years. We appreciate every single one of you and your support tonight, and for keeping this conversation going tonight here in the chat. Been a fantastic evening. We look forward to next week. Look forward to the videos we've got coming your way over these next couple of days. Stay tuned for that right here on the channel. But with that, have a great rest of your night, and we'll see you next time right here on the Gridiron Expert. Have a great night, everybody.